And so there was just a lot of excitement. So I arrived a couple weeks into my assignment. We get invited, the embassy, the folks selected the mission, to this event at the Vatican. Very interesting backstory. This event was actually due to Harley Davidson. So I don't know if folks are familiar with Harley Davidson. My dad used to ride motorcycles. I used to ride on the back of them on Harleys when I was a kid. So they have a soft place in my heart. But Harley Davidson is an American company, a motorcycle company. Unbeknownst to me at the time, they do sort of a ride through Europe, I guess every year, every couple of years. And it culminates in sort of driving up the road Via della Conciliazione that leads up to St. Peter's, to the church and to the Vatican. And so it was their 110th, 115th anniversary, something like that. And they were celebrating. So they had this big event. They donated 2 gorgeous white Harleys to the Vatican police force. And so that's what this event was kind of celebrating. So as they were an American company, they invited, we were sort of a part of that role, and they invited those of us from the U.S. Embassy to attend. I had no idea I was about to meet Pope Francis for the very first time. He was there. The Harleys actually were just off to the side. Sadly, they didn't make it in the picture. I mean, that would have been amazing. Me, a Harley, and the Pope in one picture. That's like a dream. So I had no idea I was going to meet Pope Francis, but he ended up being there at the event. And this is the very first time that I met him in person. Actually, I got to meet him 5 times that I got to meet him in person and shake his hand. If I should move you a little bit away to stop the feedback. Is this better? So I have no idea what I was saying to him at this moment, because I always just sort of black out. Like with anyone really cool or interesting like that, I hope that I said something interesting. I hope that I said something appropriate. I think I was trying to say something to him in Spanish, because he's Argentinian. But anyways, super cool. So again, just some of the examples of things that you might do. With the Vatican, we worked on so many different interesting global issues, promoting human rights, promoting care for the environment, combating trafficking in persons, promoting international religious freedom, so many different issues. So again, just a sampling of where you might go with this career. I've also met, prime ministers and presidents, and actually some NBA stars too. I don't know, do we have any basketball? And WNBA. Yeah. So I don't know if anyone knows WNBA, but Cheryl Swoops, I got to meet her, which was super cool. These are some old heads, but Robert Ory. I'm born and raised in LA, so I'm a Laker fan till I die. And so I got to meet him too, and Karl Malone, for any folks who were Utah Jazz fans. So anyways, tons of different people and places and things that you might do and see. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, because I'm sure everyone who's here knows that the State Department is the foreign affairs arm of the U.S. federal government. We are in the business of foreign policy. We are implementing the president and the administration's foreign policy priorities, agenda, goals, and we have embassies and consulates all over the world doing this work. Why do we do this sort of crazy lifestyle, and why might people be interested in doing this sort of with us? A number of reasons. Often at the top of that, at least for me, and I know for a lot of my colleagues, is to have a sense of purpose and to give back and to be of service to our country and ultimately to the world, and wanting to do good in the world. I joined the State Department very young, was really wanting to help promote world peace. I think back to the Miss Congeniality movie, where she's like, I really do want world peace. I did. And so, it's part of why I joined. A lot of times, at various moments in your life, you might ask yourself, like, is what I'm doing mattering? Am I impacting people? Is this doing any good in the world? Are people hearing me? What am I doing, and is there any impact? I don't really ever have to ask myself that question, because I know that what I've done has made an impact, whether it's one single person that I've helped, one American that I've helped through a difficult situation overseas, or from the biggest policy issue that I've had an impact on. I know that what I've done in every single assignment in some way has been either helpful to individuals or to greater policy issues. And a lot of us feel that way and get a lot of satisfaction from that. If you like change, which I do, I get bored easily. So I like moving around. I like learning new languages, going to new places. Then this can be a great opportunity for that too. The State Department will teach you whatever language you need to know to go to where you're going. So I came in with Spanish, but they taught me Portuguese before I went to Brazil, and they taught me Italian before I went to Italy. So they'll pay for you to do all of that. There are also a lot of benefits. So yes, we are the government, and so it will be, a government salary, but there are thousands of dollars worth of benefits for being in this career. Some of them financial and some of them other. For me personally, the biggest financial benefit has been that when you're living overseas, your housing is free. So that's typically the biggest expense all of us have every month, right? Is mortgage, rent, whatever it might be. So imagine not having to pay that for years and years on end, and how much you could save with that. So if you're anything like me, when I joined right out of graduate school, I had a car loan. I still had some student loans. I had some credit card debt. And in my first assignment in Australia, because I didn't have to pay rent for 2 years, I was able to pay everything off and be debt-free since then. So for those maybe coming from backgrounds like me, where financial stability is not something I grew up with, to be able to have that as an adult, and then to be able to be that stable person for my family if the car breaks down or someone loses their job or whatever, has been really meaningful as well. If you have kids when you're in the foreign service, your kids' schooling overseas gets paid for. It's often the best private schooling around, the international school, the American school, British school, whatever it is. That's thousands of dollars worth too. Pension, some of you might not be thinking about things like pension yet, but soon enough, another decade or two, you will. A lot of companies don't really offer pension anymore, and so that's their student loan repayment, of course. And then depending on where you serve, and this is just small list, there are many more. But depending on where you serve, you can also get, more perks. So if you're serving in a difficult place, like when I was in Afghanistan, I made almost double my salary for serving there, because as you can imagine, there were some difficulties, some security difficulties and other difficulties. And so that's, another perk or benefit that you might have. So a lot of people think in the State Department, oh, I have to be an IR major, or I have to be a public policy major, or something along those lines. But we are looking for all academic disciplines, not only for our student programs, but also for our careers. We're hiring engineers, we're hiring IT specialists. In fact, I'm going to pause for a second right now to see what people are studying or what people are focused on who are here with us in person, and maybe online, actually. Online, if you are able to put in the chat kind of what your major is or what your area of interest is, and maybe Marlene can read those for us too. But first, in the room, what are we studying, or what is our job? What are we focused on? Maybe starting with you.
I am international relations, but I also have languages for second major.
Okay, fabulous.
We work in the global education office, so we're studying referendums.
Oh, okay. It's nice. Yeah. All three. Okay. Fabulous. Yeah.
So in the chat, Teresa majored in international relations with a focus on the Middle East, minor in Arabic, and second major in Spanish. And then Paloma major is political science and Spanish and Portuguese. And then Liv is international relations, possibly law.
Oh, okay. A lot of languages in there, which I love. Love that curiosity about the world and other cultures that brings. Fantastic. So we are looking for a range of folks across everything. What are our opportunities? I'm going to do kind of a brief overview of the different types of career paths here, but then I can go into any detail, more based on what folks are interested in. So in the State Department, career-wise, we have kind of two employment groupings. We have the foreign service, which is where you're living and working overseas at our embassies and consulates. So doing what I do, you're changing assignments every couple of years, going to a new country, learning a new language, working on new issues. And then we have, and those are also so in the foreign service, that's what we're doing, we're living and working overseas. But then there are two groups within the foreign service. One are the generalists, where we work on any number of issues where we go. So you don't have to have a particular degree or particular work experience. I was sort of the traditional IR major, IR bachelor's and public policy master's, but I have colleagues who majored in biology, who majored in engineering, who or former lawyers, former journalists, former military, who are vets, things like that. So it could be anything. And then there's also the foreign service specialist side. As that name suggests, these are folks who are hired for that specialized work experience or educational experience. These are our IT specialists, our engineers, our law enforcement personnel, our doctors, our office managers, our English language teachers, all kinds of things. So the main difference sort of here is both are in the foreign service everyone's living overseas and traveling. With the Foreign Service Officer generalist, again, you're working on multiple issues. Even though you're a generalist, you're asked to choose one of those 5 career tracks on the slide to focus most of your career on. I'm in the public diplomacy career track, so I do communications. But within those, you could work on a number of things. If you are hired as a foreign service specialist, going overseas still, but wherever you go, you're doing that same role. So if you're hired as a doctor, then everywhere you go, you're a doctor. And so that's for folks who really want to focus more on a particular issue. And then we actually do have domestic positions. A lot of people don't realize that either, but we have a domestic workforce called the civil service. They're going to be mostly in Washington, D.C. because that's where our headquarters is. So most of the positions are there. But we also have some passport agencies and other field offices across the U.S. So closest passport agencies to here, I think, are El Paso and also Tucson, but maybe El Paso.
Denver as well.
Oh, Denver as well. Okay. Which one, driving wise? El Paso.
It's like this operating. But
Oh,
and we report to the
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah. So the folks working at those different passport agencies, those are folks who are in the civil service. So they're part of the State Department obviously as well. Then we also have, and just because folks mentioned languages and some of the ones up on the screen, I'll mention this briefly. We have another career path called the Consular Fellows Program. It's called a limited non-career appointment, as you see on the slide, because it's not a career. You can only do this job for up to 5 years. But if you have one of those 4 languages on the screen, then you're eligible to apply. And you're going overseas to do specifically consular work. And so you might get an assignment or 2, maybe 2 countries in that amount of time, and you're doing consular work. And if you decide, yes, I love this career path, I love living overseas, then you can apply to some of the other positions. And then we have tons of student programs in sort of 3 buckets: internships, fellowships, study abroad scholarships. Our colleagues in the back are going to know those programs really well. And so we can touch more on that in a moment. So as I mentioned, I'll just kind of cover briefly some of these next slides so we can move more into student programs. The generalists are going to be, and that's me, that's what I do, are going to be working on a number of issues. I worked on counterterrorism issues, human rights issues, Hague Convention adoption issues, all kinds of things. But you are going to have to choose one of these when you join. And so public diplomacy, again, that's what I do. We are doing all the public facing work when we're overseas. We're working with journalists, doing media relations. We are organizing seminars, conference on important policy issues to help get the word out about what is the U.S. position, why does the U.S. have that position, why should people agree with us sort of in that position. We're doing social media, we're managing the embassy's, the State Department's exchange program, so Fulbright, a professional program, we manage that. In the management field, these are really our COOs, our CFOs of our embassies and consulates. The 3 kind of main areas there are financial management, human resources, and building operations management. Consular work is twofold, really. And this is maybe where most Americans might have their first touch with the State Department. One side of consular work is working with American citizens, helping American citizens. That's actually one of the main reasons we exist overseas, of course, for diplomacy and policy, but we're also there to help American citizens, in situations of crisis or routine things like reissuing or renewing a passport. So you're helping American citizens with those things. The other flip side of consular work is interviewing foreign nationals who need a visa to come to the United States, applying immigration law to see if they are eligible for that visa. So I did consular work when I was in Brazil, would interview Brazilians who were applying to come to the United States, and doing my best to make the right decision in those cases. And political and economic work, this is really kind of monitoring and engaging with government officials and other influencers on what's happening politically and economically in the country, writing back analyses and reports for those policymakers in Washington so that they can be more informed about what's going on the ground and have those recommendations about how to move forward. I won't really go into this unless we have questions, but for generalists, because we don't have to have a particular background, what we are really assessed on in the application process are things called the 13 dimensions. These are a set of skills that the State Department has deemed important for a Foreign Service Officer diplomat to be successful. So some of these are going to be pretty obvious: cultural adaptability, oral communication, written communication. So these are the things that you want to demonstrate throughout the application process. But if there are questions on the application, we can talk about it later. And then I mentioned the foreign service specialists. These are all the categories. Within each category, there are multiple jobs there. But for example, that bottom right-hand circle, law enforcement, a lot of people don't realize that we have our own law enforcement arm, which is called the Diplomatic Security Service. So I always sort of reference the Fast and the Furious movies. So if you've seen the Fast and the Furious movies, then The Rock in that movie, he's a special agent in our Diplomatic Security Service. Not exactly true to life as to day what a special agent would be doing. But at least the name recognition is there. Some of the stuff is true enough. So we have our own law enforcement agency, the special agents with security engineers who are helping to protect us physically, technically, and electronically from people trying to do bad things against us. So anyways, lots of different opportunities there. These are just all the breakdown of all of those, which I'm not going to unless you have questions on that. And then the civil service, again, domestic opportunities across these 11 different categories, and of course, dozens of jobs within these categories, but these are some of the themes. So you'll see a lot of what we talked about in the foreign service world is also reflected here in civil service because we need people in Washington, D.C. doing this work as well. So, so student opportunities, lots. I purposefully keep this full, although there's plenty of things to keep it full, because there are a lot of opportunities for students out there to dip a toe in, through an internship and see if this could be for them, to do a fellowship or to do a study abroad program. So I'm going to start with a note about our fellowships. We have 3 fellowships currently. We're about to be bringing on 2 more in the next couple of weeks. Those ones in bold. All of our fellowships are career pipelines, meaning that should you be successful in getting the fellowship, you're joining the State Department at the end of it. So you've got a guaranteed job waiting for you. For our Foreign Affairs IT Fellowship, that's exclusively for IT majors. Remember, I told you we're looking for STEM people too. Also IR folks, I'm an IR folk myself. So that's obviously welcome, but we're looking for, for a range of disciplines. And the Pickering and Rangel Fellowship, I'm actually a Pickering Fellow. That's how I joined the State Department, through that fellowship program. So I'm a success case and can tell you just firsthand what it means to kind of change the trajectory of your life, to participate in something like that. So there's a Pickering and the Rangel Fellowship for those who want to join as Foreign Service Officer Generalists. So for the fellowships, each one is a little bit different, but basically they have the same major components. All of them pay for 2 years of your education. All of them offer 2 paid consecutive summer internships, one domestic, one overseas, and all of them offer professional development opportunities. You have networking options, you get assigned a mentor, and then you join the State Department at the end, depending on which fellowship will depend on which career you join. And then there's a 5-year service commitment kind of in return. It's the only ask really in return for all of that you serve for at least 5 years. And then with our internships, so many things. So, and I won't go necessarily through all of them, but I do want to flag one in particular at the top, and that's the student internship program. This is our flagship premier internship program. This was always the program through which we had the most interns join us. It was always unpaid in the past. However, due to some funding that we got from Congress just in April, this is now a paid program. So we're really excited about that, to break down some barriers, because when it's unpaid, only students in certain financial situations are able to do it, and that's doesn't offer the opportunity to the full range of people who would be interested in doing this work. So this is now paid. It's by semester full-time, so you can do it for the spring, summer, or the fall, but it's full-time for that semester. And you can do it overseas or domestic, so in Washington, D.C., or at a U.S. embassy or consulate, COVID permitting at the time, depending on what the situation in the world is. But you can do it overseas as well. And again, for all majors, all of our internships are for all majors because all the work that we're doing is interdisciplinary. You'll see some of the eligibility there. I will just make a note about the paid component because it's paid in 3 ways. So this is not just a typical paid internship where it's paid by the hour. It's much more than that. So 1, yes, it's paid by the hour, currently at a rate of $17.51, so not bad. But number 2, and the best thing about this is that your housing is covered. So it's a huge expense when you're doing an internship out of town. So the housing, whether you're doing it in DC or you're doing it overseas, is going to be covered. And then 3rd, your commuting costs, basically your travel to and from that housing and the work location are also covered. So it's a really fulsome financial package. You're basically left with just paying for your flight and food. This program, as are all of our careers and almost all of our student programs, does require, of course, U.S. citizenship, but also a security clearance. And so because of the security clearance, the deadlines are pretty far in advance to give you that time to hopefully successfully get your clearance before you start your internship. So, for example, the application period for the spring 2023 internship opened July of this year. Also, the application is only open for 10 days. So you kind of like be on it or be in communication with me, and I can let you know if you're interested when it's going to open up. So the next opportunity is actually going to be for summer 2023. That's the next one that's going to open up. And we don't have an exact date yet, but probably last week of October, first or second week of November. If you did sign up with us and you noticed and you marked that you were interested in internships, then when that goes live, you'll get an email so you know. But this is a really great opportunity, very fulsome financial package. Again, you just want to get some experience and see, could this be for me further down the line? And then I'll also just briefly mention this virtual internship opportunity. It is unpaid, but it's super flexible. And so that's why I like to mention it for those, for whom a traditional full-time internship experience just isn't possible. Family obligations, course load, whatever it might be. So this virtual internship, it was always virtual when it was created over 10 years ago. So this was pre-pandemic, before virtual was a thing. This was an opportunity for people to be able to flexibly do an internship with the State Department from wherever they are. So you'll also notice that the eligibility is basically be a student and be a U.S. citizen. So the eligibility is much more flexible here as well. There's no GPA minimum. You can be a freshman through a doctoral candidate or anything in between. You don't need a security clearance for this one, so the deadline is much more reasonable. It opens every July 1st. You apply in July, you find out if you got it in August, you start in September. So it's boom, boom, boom. It's much faster than the other ones. It's for the full academic year, but it's only part-time. So it's a maximum of 10 hours a week. So it just fits better, with some student schedules, still giving them that opportunity to engage and to work with us, but on just a more flexible schedule. So I did just want to mention that. And then we have tons more. I won't go into the details of all of them, but I do have a handout here that talks about our student programs for those of you who are interested, or if there are questions, I can kind of go into it. But other opportunities, this one is a 2 consecutive paid summer internship. The Wrangle Summer Enrichment Program is like an international affairs boot camp for undergrads to expose them to current issues in international affairs, but also what are the range of careers in international affairs that one might be looking for, or might be able to get sort of with their degree and their experience. So it's a 6-week summer program at Howard University. They're meeting with people, not just the State Department, but others in this space, like Peace Corps or USAID, or even something like World Bank, others like that. And then they're also doing a bit of coursework, because it's kind of preparing you for graduate school to give you kind of more of the academic skills to prepare you for this career too. So you're doing some coursework, you're going to seminars, having these meetings, networking, and it's fully covered in terms of the expenses. I will just say here, I mentioned earlier that with the fellowships, all of them are career pipelines, so you've got a job waiting for you at the end of it with the State Department. The difference is that with the Pickering and the Wrangle, you join as a Foreign Service Officer, so that's the career that you go into. With our other IT fellowship, you join as one of those Foreign Service Specialist categories that I was talking about in the IT technical specialist field. And this actually, the IT one just opened on Monday. But then we're also going to have a 4th fellowship open up in case anyone actually does want to become the Rock from that film. If anyone wants to be a special agent in our diplomatic security service. You'll see some X's there because it's not on the website yet. We don't have the exact details just yet, but it's like any day now, in the next couple of weeks, this fellowship will open up. It will have those same financial components that I mentioned earlier, only difference being that you will join as a special agent in our law enforcement arm. So that's of interest. Also coming online in the next couple of weeks, tons of programs, as I mentioned, kind of lots of opportunities to get experience with us. We just launched, in fact, the Secretary of State himself just launched it a couple of weeks ago, the Colin Powell Leadership Program. This is a program that offers both internships and fellowships for those who want to be in the civil service. So if you want to be on the domestic side of the house, staying in the States but working on policy issues, this is going to open up the first week of October. And they're going to start 10 to 12 interns and 4 or 6 fellows in this opportunity. And then study abroad. There are lots of opportunities to study abroad with the State Department, but also with many, other entities as well. The ones that I have on the slide here are sort of the most prominent, most relevant to students. Our study abroad office, of course, Todd and his colleagues are very familiar with everything here. But there's money out there, not just from us, but from other places as well. Travel is such an incredible experience, and it's such a great education, and I'm such a big proponent of it. You learn so much, not only about others, other peoples, other languages, other cultures, but in my experience about yourself as well. What have you been taught about the world? And when you see it firsthand for yourself, is that really the case? You just learn to have a more fulsome perspective about people's and just kind of a greater appreciation even for your own role as a global citizen, and learn how everything is just interconnected. And so I'm passionate about travel as an educational experience as well. So if you are interested at all in study abroad, please don't let money be a reason that you don't do it, because there's money out there, whether it's from us, Department of Defense, NGOs, foundations, and Todd and his colleagues can kind of talk about other opportunities as well. But there is money. So please don't let that be a reason that you don't, have this incredible experience. So I can't answer questions kind of specifically on any of these if you'd like, but I will sort of actually go back to the critical language scholarship one for a second. So if people have heard of this scholarship, you've probably mostly heard of the paid summer version of this, the critical language scholarship one. But just launched in the spring, there's actually a virtual version, again, for those for whom a full-time in-person situation just isn't going to work for whatever reason. That was just launched in the spring, called CLS, which stands for Critical Language Scholarship, Spark. So I think someone maybe in the Zoom chat mentioned Arabic as a language.
Yeah.
And so if you have one of those three languages, Arabic, Mandarin, Chinese, or Russian, this is a scholarship to do virtual language study and experiential programs to further your knowledge of those three languages. So it's fully paid. Your tuition for anything that might be involved, any virtual activities you might do as a group, the language instruction by a native speaker, all of that is included. And so this is just another, flexible option for folks. But one thing I want to highlight about this is that if you do this virtual program, you are considered automatically as a semifinalist, at the semifinalist level for the in-person critical language scholarship. So that's pretty substantial. So you're already kind of halfway to the finish line in being already at that level. You're only then competing with others who also made it to the semifinalist round. So that's something new in this field as well. And that's me. So as I mentioned, I'm covering the Southwest region, Arizona, New Mexico, and Nevada. Again, my email, that offer is sincere and very real. This is not only my job, but it's what I feel passionately about. That's what I like doing, is talking to students, talking to people, and kind of helping to advise them and see what could be a good fit for them. And even more than that, just knowing that there's so many opportunities out there, so if you think you can only do one career, you've only known sort of maybe the options of your family or your community, there's so much out there to explore, early on, start looking at things freshman, sophomore, but there's just so much out there. And I just have a passion for making sure that young people know that, I don't want to be cliche, but the world is your oyster. Like, you can do any number of things. There's so many things out there. So I don't like young folks to feel limited by any means. So I'm going to kind of pause there for the moment, see if we have any questions here or in the chat. Also remind you that for any of these things, if you want to take a handout with you, there's some more information on the careers, some more information on the student programs. But I'm here as your resource. So if anyone has any questions moving forward, please reach out to me. I'm happy to chat anytime. I hold office hours every week, so we can have a phone call as well. But it's my pleasure to be here and to be talking to you. So I'll pause to see if we have any in-person or chat questions.
Thank you so much. I'm Kathleen Knight, I direct Latin American Studies here, and I was wondering, I have a couple of questions. One is, do you have any stories of, or just give us an idea of colleagues, people you've met along the way in area studies, whether Latin American studies or other area studies, and where they might fit in foreign service or civil service.
Mm-hmm.
And my other question was, and I should have known the answer by now, but what's the relationship between the State Department and the Peace Corps?
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so I'm going to come back maybe I'll tackle the second one first real quick. Let me come back here. Okay. And I may ask you to remind me of the first question again when we go back to it. So second question, relationship between the State Department and the Peace Corps. I mean, we are our own entities, so it's different paths to pursue. But a lot of return Peace Corps volunteers then go on to apply for the State Department successfully to become a Foreign Service officer, or in some cases a Foreign Service specialist if they have a specialized degree. So we see a lot of those folks who went overseas on Peace Corps, loved it, had a transformative experience, and said, yes, I want to be doing this full time. And so then they come and join us. And so there's a very strong contingent of Peace Corps in the State Department. On your first question about those in area studies and where do I see them as colleagues?
Right, because
Everywhere.
it's different. IR and area studies they're related, but
Right.
also very different.
So I see them everywhere, in short, but in a couple places in particular. Certainly I'm a Foreign Service Officer Generalist, certainly as colleagues, FSOs, I see a number of colleagues who majored in Japanese history or who majored in, Latin American, the Caribbean, or Russian history and literature, or sort of any number of things. And so often someone with that major will go onto this career because they want to live, in those regions. They want to deepen their knowledge of those cultures and languages, and have that experience advancing positive U.S. foreign policy there. So I see them there. I also see them in the civil service because in the civil service, while they're not traveling overseas, they're still working on policy issues. They're still working on sort of training issues, other things. And so in the civil service, there are a number of colleagues who are working in our various regional bureaus that focus on Western Hemisphere or Europe or South and Central Asia, et cetera. Where I see them or have seen them in particular in the past in the civil service is in the Bureau of Intelligence and Research. I did an assignment there 1 year in their watch office. That bureau, these are sort of intel analysts, kind of, if you will. These are often PhDs who have been studying Russia for many, many years, or other places, China, wherever for many, many years. And they are providing analysis, kind of why are things happening the way they are, because they have that perspective of the history and the knowledge. And so they're able to then offer, through their reports, some recommendations on what might be the way forward. Or part of that bureau too, they do opinion polling overseas and then kind of collect that data and try to make sense of what it means and why people, are answering that way. And again, just kind of the history, the perspective of the culture and historical perspective of what has happened in those various countries. So in short, again, I see them everywhere. I see them in our overseas careers, and I see them in our domestic careers as well. And then a lot of the student programs, a lot of students will come to us for an internship or for a fellowship who have majored in a certain region and or a certain language, oftentimes it's both, but one or the other. Did I cover both of them?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Yes.
I'll make a comment and then ask a question. So
Yeah.
we actually do have a Peace Corps rep here at the University of New Mexico. So they will be on campus for our study abroad fair. And if you have questions, you can just contact the Education Abroad office. We get in touch with David. And we also have the Peace Corps prep program here on campus, which is run by Stephen Bishop over in International Studies. My question for positions within the State Department, when I looked at those types of positions, and forgive me if I'm wrong, I'm misinterpreting it, but several positions always seem to have some sort of like a code, like you have to have like some level of a military experience or something like that. Like that, I don't ever recall seeing positions just listed like you would see on a LinkedIn. There was something like you had to have some sort of clearance, some sort of code, like you need to be listed by the government in some way. And I've had students, myself included, like I can't even apply for this because I don't even know what they're asking, what qualification are they referring to, because it's not like a degree qualification, a language qualification.
So
Some sort of government clearance.
So no clearance is needed for any of our positions before you join. Now, once you join, of course, yes, we're going to have you go through the clearance process. No prior military experience is needed for anything. What you might be referring to is the fact that for all of our civil service careers and some of our foreign service specialist careers, you have to apply through usajobs.gov. So you have to create an account, and this is a platform that a lot of government agencies use to hire for their domestic positions and other positions. So you have to have an account on usajobs.gov, and then through there you search for what's available at any given time. So you won't necessarily find the job postings elsewhere because they're just all there. You go and you search for what you want, and then you can find them all there. Another place where you can find the information, of course, in the bottom right of the slide, careers.state.gov. That will describe all of the different careers that I've just talked about. And then for each one, it will take you either to the USA jobs.gov link, if that's how you apply for that position, or it will describe the application process if the application process is different and through another platform. So for example, to become a Foreign Service Officer Generalist, like me, you don't apply on usajobs.gov. The first step is signing up for a written exam. There's a link on the website that will take you there, and then you kind of go through the different steps. And some of the other Foreign Service specialists, also the first step is a written exam. So careers.state.gov can be the first place to go to, depending on what career you're after. And then from there, you're either going to usajobs.gov or you're signing up to take a written exam through the website. Hopefully that helps to clarify. But the first point of contact can be careers.state.gov to find out where then you need to go from there.
You have some questions?
Please.
So Paloma asked, for the internships for foreign service specialists, is it also a career pipeline or is it more complicated? And also are all internship window applications open for all internships?
So that is a good question. So if you're interested in the Foreign Service Specialist career path, whether Foreign Service Specialist or Generalist or any other career paths, really, the internships are open to you. So I'm sorry, say the first part again. So if you're interested in Foreign Service internships,
Is it also a career pipeline? Or is it-
okay. So none of the internships are career pipelines, only the fellowships are career pipelines. The fellowships will pay for 2 out of the 3, they'll pay for a master's degree, and then you join the State Department at the end of that degree. For the IT one, it will pay either for the last 2 years of undergrad or a master's degree, so there's some flexibility there. But only the fellowships are career pipelines. For the internships, they are experience, but if you decide you like it and you want to go on to a career, you have to apply the regular way for the career opportunities. And then the second part of that question was,
Are all internship window applications open for all templates?
so no, so it varies. Each program is different. And so I know that adds another, perhaps a layer of complication. But the handouts again that I have here, maybe I can follow up with just sending some links that can be shared to those who are joining us virtually. But so for example, the student internship program, that's going to be open 10 days. The virtual student federal service one is open for the entire month of July. So there's time there. The USFSIP, that U.S. Foreign Service Internship Program, that opens for about 7 days in the 3rd week of August. But we know it's going to be in August, or you know it's going to be in August, so you can prepare and be ready to look on careers.state.gov in that 3rd week of August, and that's open for about 7 days. The Wrangell Summer Enrichment Program is open, I believe, for several months, maybe 2 to 3 months. Those are kind of the key internships. And then the fellowships, all of the fellowships are open for several months. So Pickering and Wrangell will be open circa July to September. The Foreign Affairs IT one will be open, or is open, September through January, February. So if you're interested in a particular one and you have questions, please feel free to email me for those online as well. And I can help kind of guide you about what the application cycle looks like for that opportunity.
And for those that have a short open period for applying, is there a lot of information that you can get ahead of time for how to start preparing?
Absolutely. So if you go to careers.state.gov, so what I may send is the same link that that some folks use to sign up here on the iPad. I can send to you to maybe send those who participated, because then if you sign up at that link, it'll be the same as if you were here in person signing up on the iPad. And then you can get notified as soon as these opportunities open up, as soon as the fellowships open up, as soon as the internships open up, so you can be aware. But even if a program is not open, you can always go to careers.state.gov, find the internship or fellowship program, and it will tell you what to prepare. What are the application materials going to be like? So for the student internship program, for example, you're going to have to get your transcripts ready. That's something you can do ahead of time and be ready with before it starts. You're going to have to do a statement of interest at 600 words, not too long. So hopefully it shouldn't take you too long to prepare, though you may want to have a scholarship advisor or faculty person look at it to just confirm. But yes, so for all of those, either careers.state.gov will tell you what the application package entails, or it may direct you to a third party, because for some of these, for the fellowships, for example, we have implementing partners, other organizations who administer these fellowships on our behalf. And so they have separate websites like Pickering's, pickeringfellowship.org, Wrangle's, wrangleprogram.org. So it might direct you to those pages, but there will always be a list of what to prepare ahead of time so you can be ready. Any other
One of those follow-ups.
Yeah, please.
In your opinion, what are the most important points to address in an application, and are you successfully applied for to the DOS scholarships or internships?
That's a good question. Some of the areas to highlight might be slightly different, kind of depending on the program, but overall, you're going to want to answer a couple of things. Number one, why state? Why have you come to our door? What are you passionate about that brings you to us? Are you interested in international affairs? Are you wanting to travel? Are you wanting to learn about new peoples and cultures? Are you wanting to study languages? What brings you to us? What is your passion? What is your sort of drive, for this experience? Why do you want to have this experience? A second piece to always kind of touch on, no matter the program, is what are you bringing to the table? What would make you a good intern or a good fellow? What experience do you have that's related to this field? But I tell students with that part too, to think more broadly about what experience means. It doesn't mean that you have to have that exact major. It doesn't mean that you have to do an IR internship. Think about how you have demonstrated sort of the skills that we're looking for in different experiences. Maybe it's through your volunteer work in your community. Maybe it's through extracurriculars. Maybe it's through experiences within your family. I mean, if we go back to the 13 dimensions that I was mentioning earlier, that Foreign Service officers are evaluated against when they apply, then you see things like, composure, cultural adaptability. So maybe if you haven't had a chance to travel overseas yet, but you want to, when you want to talk about what you would bring to that experience, maybe are you teaching English as a second language in your community? Something like that. You don't have to be overseas to have interactions with people who are not from the same backgrounds as you. You can have that here, right, in the city, or maybe back home with your family, depending on what dynamics are there. So think broadly about what experiences and how you've kind of had to be challenged and demonstrate these various qualities in your life. So it doesn't mean you have to have a certain job or you have to have a certain internship or a certain major, but think about what you are bringing holistically to this experience. So those are two key things I would always mention. And then depending on the fellowship or program, some of them you have to demonstrate financial need. Some of them you actually have to write a statement of financial need, like the fellowships. So be thinking, about how you would frame why you need this fellowship in order to pursue your graduate studies. But yeah, those are general things. The first two, in any case, things you always want to touch on, no matter the application. Any other questions from the student programs or from the virtual folks?
No, I think it's not all of them.
Okay. I'll leave this open here then. So yeah.
I'll ask another one.
Please.
We get these questions all the time in our office. So I'm curious as to why, particularly in the foreign service, individuals are transitioned to new positions every few years, particularly if they've been sent to a country to acquire a very specific set of linguistic and cultural skills, and then being sent to a country that has nothing to do with those specific cultural and linguistic skills, or individuals that we've worked with in the past, Korean American students, for example, that speak Korean or have some level, and then they're sent to Brazil.
So we aren't sent anywhere by the State Department except for the first two assignments that you do. When you're in the Foreign Service, as Foreign Service Officer Generalist, in any case, your very first two assignments are what are called directed. So the State Department is telling you where to go. That being said, they give you a list to express your preference. They almost always match you with like your top 10 or so. So really, it is kind of where you said you wanted to go. After that, your career is up to you. And so people themselves are choosing to, apply for the positions that they want. So if they want to spend 2-3 tours in Japan, go for it. If they want to spend 2-3 tours in Russia, go for it. There's nothing stopping them. And that is welcome. There are people who want to do that in the State Department, but then there are other people who want just the breadth of experience. I'm not sure, like me, go to Australia one assignment, go to Brazil another, go to Italy another. So after those first two assignments where you're directed, your career is yours. So it's totally up to you. If you want to use the language experience that you had before coming in, you can. I know some people who came in with a certain language, Russian, Chinese, Arabic, whatever it was, but they didn't want to serve there. They had kind of been there, done that. They wanted to learn other languages. And so they pursue that. So it's really up to the individual and how they want to create and navigate their career, what they're looking for as career. what kind of experiences. So there's no State Department telling you like you can't stay in Japan. I mean, you do sort of rotate. You could do the next assignment there, or maybe you go somewhere else and then you come back. But the State Department isn't saying that you can't stay and deepen your knowledge there and your experience there. You can absolutely do that. I know several people who have gone back to China, for example, for 2, 3, 4 assignments, or who've gone back to Japan, 2, 3, 4, or who bounce around different places in the Middle East who want to stay in that region too. So that's totally up to them, to each person to craft their career. Please, yeah.
I think I am talking with our program students, stories help, and you mentioned that you know that you always are doing some good. And I wonder if you could give us an example so I can imagine what it's like a day in the life of,
Yes.
or an hour in the life of.
So I sort of stayed behind here so I could kind of be on camera but now I'm going to move because I talk with my hands. Let me go back to that slide actually real quick. So knowing that you made a difference, I mean, I have tons of stories I'll share too to answer your question there. And my colleagues have tons of stories of, moments of impact that they had over their career, from helping out one person to helping on the biggest policy issue. So I have an example of each. So when I was doing my consular assignment in Brazil, so in consular work, one side of it is helping American citizens from something as routine as a passport renewal to they get arrested, or after they die, they get robbed, something like that. So when I was doing my consular tour in Brazil, I was doing a rotation in American Citizen Services, that's what we call it, the office that helps American citizens overseas. So we got a call one day, my office, from a local hospital in Rio de Janeiro. That's where I served at our consulate in Rio de Janeiro when I was in Brazil. Got a call from the local hospital saying there was an American there and he had attempted to commit suicide. And he was in the healing process. He was alive, but he made it through, thankfully. So really, when I took to the hospital to get all the details, I was in touch with his family to obviously a difficult conversation to have, but to let them know that he was alive. This is the situation. Of course, he has to sign a privacy waiver for that. We're very careful not to tell people's business unless they feel comfortable with that. And so every day for almost 6 weeks, I called him every day to make sure that he was okay. To let him know that somebody cared about him, to let him know that somebody wanted him to stay alive and to succeed and to return to his family. And that someone, had an interest in him, and that he wasn't alone, and that he could talk to me about anything. That I was working to try to get him repatriated or bring him back to the State Department, to the United States to be with his family. And so we of course got to know each other a bit through that, and in some conversations, said, "Oh, hi, Antoinette. How are you doing today?" And I'm okay today. I think it's going to be all right. And I'm looking forward to going back to the States and being with my family, and just knowing that I helped potentially keep this man alive and keep him from trying to do that again. And more than that, bringing him safely back to the United States to be with his family. So that's one example, just helping one person through something that was a traumatic experience for them. Now, on the biggest foreign policy stage impact, this was all, of course, probably not necessarily secret, but not out in the public at the time, but now is known. So there was an assignment that I did in Washington, D.C. that is what is called advanced work for the Secretary of State. Anyone heard of advanced work? Basically what it means is, and advanced work exists in many different realms, not just in the public sector. Advanced work is when you are going ahead of a VIP who has a trip, a visit, whether it's international or even domestic. You're going ahead of them to prepare the trip for them, make sure everything is in place, security-wise, logistically, and then of course, substantively with the various programs and meetings that we're going to have. So we have an office of the state, the White House has this, the Vice President has this, lots of other, every cabinet head will have this, and I'm sure CEOs probably have people doing this for them as well. So we have an office of the State Department of people who do this for the Secretary of State. So I was doing an assignment there of advanced work for the Secretary of State at the time it was Hillary Clinton. This was circa 2009, 2010. Anybody, maybe the staff here, anybody recall what was happening in Libya at that time? Or anybody remember the name of the former head of Libya? Gaddafi. So he had just been brought down. there was a new interim government with the Libyan revolutionary government trying to bring some stability to the whole situation, trying to bring some democracy to Libya. Gaddafi was not a good person. He did not treat his people well, killed a lot of his people. So this was obviously very tense kind of moment in Libyan history as we're trying to rebuild from the situation. So as this was happening in the background, I am told to go to Tunisia. So I pack my bags, and then the secretary's going to go to Tunisia and go prepare for visit there. Okay, I'm on the plane. I have a layover in Paris. I get off the plane in Paris, I check my work phone, and I have a message from work saying, get off the plane. We think she's going to Paris instead. Go get a hotel in Paris and wait for the instructions. Okay, sure, sure. I'm like, well, why? I was secretary say, I'll do whatever she needs to do. Was able to, but I was worried, can I even get my bag off the plane and go back and going on to Tunisia, and I'm kind of stuck here with no clothes. Nothing you can buy clothes in Paris, hopefully. But maybe that would have been a good answer, actually. To freshen up the word. So I get off the plane, I go find a hotel in Paris, I wait for the instructions. She comes to Paris and has a number of different meetings, some of which are related to Libya, because at the time, what European powers and other powers were trying to see how can we support Libya as it's going to keep the situation safe. So at one point, as I was preparing the trip, I get a phone call from a senior person in Washington, the State Department, saying, Antoinette, here's the phone number, here's the cell number to the head of the Libyan revolutionary government. We need you to call him, and we need you to tell him or ask him if he would come to Paris to meet with Secretary Clinton so that they can talk about the next steps and how the U.S. can be supported. So, like, excuse me, what? They want me to call this gentleman on this cell phone. I'm sure he has bigger fish to fry. He's even going to believe that it's me. Like, why would he believe me that I'm calling on behalf of the Secretary of State? That's the biggest prank call ever. So I was like, okay, sure. I got the cell phone number, and his cell phone number was changing like every couple of days. He, was under threat of assassination from Gaddafi's henchmen, a lot of stuff going on. So I called the gentleman. He believes me, thankfully, and he says yes. Of course, I'll come and meet with her. So worked with him. He was able to arrive in Paris. We brought him through kind of the back entrance of the hotel. None of this was public at the time. This is known. We brought him to the back entrance, so media wouldn't see him, so nothing would come out. Two other officials accompanied him in this meeting. One was just a senior official who worked on the State Department. Another was Ambassador Chris Stevens. I don't know if anyone recognizes that name. Ambassador Chris Stevens was a career Foreign Service diplomat who was killed in the Benghazi attacks. He was ambassador. So he was the man who was on that to meet him. Very impressive public servant. So all of them went into the meeting with the Secretary of State. Now, I wasn't in the meeting personally, but I made it happen, and I arranged all the logistics that led to it. A couple of days later, the State Department and the U.S. government announced some pretty substantial measures to support the Libyan revolutionary government in their next steps to try to bring democracy to Libya as a direct result of that meeting, and kind of my role in bringing the meeting to happen. So that's like the biggest foreign policy, impact you can have on the world stage and be a part of history. I mean, for always, I will remember my role in that moment of history and how fragile the situation was. And hopefully that we did something to bring some stability and some good out of what was going on. So a little bit long, but I think stories like that are important because it shows, why do we do this? And why is it important? Why does it matter? And it's exciting, if any of this is something you would want to do yourself. In many other different ways, and in many other countries, there are moments like this in almost every country. Then this is a chance to have that direct impact, and it's unparalleled. There aren't other opportunities like this for someone who wants to do this type of work.